Off since it's 7:45. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Looks like we have a great turnout here on an early snowy morning, I think for most of us probably. My name is Beth Engum. I am a consultant with CBS Squared. I'm also a civil engineer and project manager, and I happen to be the president of the Minnesota chapter of APWA this year. So we're going to get started with this first session of infrastructure talks at the Capitol. Too bad we're not all there, although it would be a bad commute maybe this morning. So this is the first of 4 conversations we're going to have. This one is really an introduction on infrastructure. And then on next Thursday morning at the same time, we'll be going over the water cycle and how Public Works is part of that cycle in every step. And then Thursday, February 19th, emerging trends such as so we're seeing a lot more rain than we used to. Asset management is a big trend right now. And then on our final talk on Thursday, February 25th, we'll be talking about the benefits of bonding. So be sure to join us for those talks. We're scheduling them for a half an hour, so we hopefully won't be taking too much of your time. So I'm going to go ahead and just do housekeeping things before I introduce our speakers. But if you can keep all of your selves muted and turn off your video, that would be great. And then use the chat feature. We've got someone keeping an eye on it. So go ahead and put any questions that you have there anytime. So as I said, my name is Beth Engum. Our panelists today are our speakers. Scott Grayson is the CEO of APWA National. We have Senator Ann Johnson Stewart, who has a whole bunch of things behind her name: civil engineer, professor, and business owner. I put those in the order that I like the most. But she's a senator too, so congratulations and thanks for joining us. Jason Stabell with ASCE in Hennepin County. Greg Stonehouse representing Minnesota 2050 as well as HDR Engineering. Lori Blair, the Executive Director of Minnesota Rural Water Association. And last but not least, Craig Gray, City of Bemidji, Director of Public Works and City Engineer. So thank you again, and I'm going to turn it right over to Scott.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. The hardest part about this morning and speaking about infrastructure is I have 2 minutes and I could speak for hours. I'm so passionate about infrastructure in our state and then also in the United States as well. Yes, I am the CEO of APWA, which is our main operations is located in Kansas City. As it happens, I live in Minnesota and pre-COVID, I spend weeks there, and then we have an office in Washington as well. We have some of our legislative advocacy staff online this morning as well. We lobby in Washington, but we work with all of our chapters in the United States and actually in Ottawa as well to really speak about the importance of looking after your infrastructure. APWA is 84 years old, and we have about 30,000 members in North America who really are the ones that are responsible for designing, building, and looking after America's infrastructure. So we as an organization constantly offer great online learning to help members around North America. When we speak about infrastructure, though, it's now really a household word. Everybody uses that word. And if you ask any one person what it means, everybody would explain it differently. It's roads, it's bridges, it's all aspects of water, wastewater, clean water, storm water. And people, as you know, are even speaking about it as broadband and internet. And if you think about it as a grouping, it's really about connecting people, roads will, internet will, and creating a sense of normalcy and public health. That's really, for me, what all of the aspects are. We have a real issue in the United States. We have an issue in our state here about we read every few years the grades and the report card, which you'll hear more about. But for all of us, state legislators, members of Congress, and all of us, we want to work as partners, really to help solve the problems. And lastly, it's not always about that shiny new building. It's about the infrastructure underneath your streets that is aging and that you can't see. There are a lot of water pipes made out of wood still in the United States. Not everybody knows that, but I was up in upstate New York, and they still have a water pipe from 1894. It's running, and as long as it stays wet, it's fine. So thank you, everyone, for having this discussion this morning. It's important, and APWA from the national or international standpoint is here to work with all of you. And then our state chapter is one of our most engaged in advocacy in the United States. Thank you.
Now we'll hear a little bit from Ann, Senator Ann Johnson Stewart.
Thanks, Beth. Good morning, everybody. I'm so thrilled that over 50 people have joined in. And Scott, thanks for that introduction. I don't think it's a secret anywhere at the Capitol that I'm a civil engineer. I've been loud and proud about it. Probably more loud and more proud because, like Scott and my colleagues on the line, I am passionate about infrastructure, and not just because it's my area of expertise, but because it's so interesting and it is in so much need of people like us to advocate. So I want to say first off how much I appreciate everybody being here, but also regardless of your party affiliation or where you live, infrastructure is important and we must support it. Jason and I tease back and forth. He's the guy who inspired me to run. He is going to talk later about this report card that ASCE put together. And I remember being at a meeting with him and turning to my university colleagues at the time and saying, how come we don't have more civil engineers in the legislature really advocating for additional funding? Frankly, it's funding, it's attention, but it's also funding. We cannot fix pipes and sewers for free. But I said, why don't we have more engineers in the legislature? And as I've said many times before, I tried to find somebody to run and turned out it was me. So I can't be quiet about this. Frankly, we've seen infrastructure failures around the country. We have followed with horror what's happening in Flint, Michigan. We saw with, I would say, immeasurable horror as the 35W bridge fell down. As engineers and public works directors, many of us know that, as Scott said, as long as a pipe stays wet, we're good. But once that flow stops or something changes, we're in big trouble. I talk often about growing up, visiting my grandparents on Lake Pepin, and I've seen the change in water quality based on the attention we've given to sanitary and stormwater separation systems around the nation. And so attention on infrastructure can change lives, it can change the quality of our life, and it has a big impact. So we have declared Infrastructure Month, February, to be Infrastructure Month. I will be here for the next 4 Thursdays, and I hope all of you reach out to me with your cares and concerns, and I can be a pipeline for you to find the right person to advocate at the Capitol. Thanks again, Beth, and I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Ann. So what is infrastructure? We got a little bit of information this morning as we've spoken, and so much of the infrastructure that we have and that we have to maintain, you just don't see it. And it's so true that if it wasn't working the way it was supposed to work, you would hear about it. So this graphic here is just a typical city street section, but it really could be any street section. There's tons of stuff underneath the pavement that when it's working, it's good. But you know, we've got sanitary sewer and water main. Those are typically a city's jurisdiction to maintain. The storm sewer that takes all the runoff when it rains and gets the water to be treated in ponds. That's all considered infrastructure. In the background, you notice the water tower, you know, so that's not in our street right away, but that water pipe is connected. There's lift stations, pump stations, wells, all of those things that need maintenance and attention as well, that you maybe see and don't think about. But all the way to an airport and the pavements at an airport and all of this same infrastructure. An airport is like a small city or a big city, and it all contains this infrastructure. Scott mentioned the small utilities. I guess we call them smaller utilities or private utilities, natural gas, fiber optics, other communication lines. Those are all usually within our right of way, and we might not be public agencies maintaining those, but we essentially by default maintain them in our right of way and have to deal with them. So they're all aging. It's great when we get new ones, but we can't live forever on, wood water pipe, which, degrades over time and probably is not the optimum way to convey water or wastewater or drinking water. So we need money in order to make sure that these things keep working the way they're meant to, and they do, contribute to the quality of life we've all come to expect. So now I will turn it over to Jason.
Hello, everyone. Again, Jason Stabell with representing ASCE, American Society of Civil Engineers. That's my after-hours job. My normal job is a transportation engineer at Hennepin County. But in 2017, the National ASCE released its 2017 Infrastructure Report Card. And nationally, we have in 2017, our cumulative infrastructure grade is a D+. And speaking of motivation of Ann, I was motivated by the fact that we hadn't done a local statewide infrastructure report card. So I took it on to be the leader of doing a report card for the state of Minnesota. So we started in 2017 and we released the first ever state level report card for the state of Minnesota in 2018. And you see it on the screen here. This is kind of our summary of our report card. And our GPA is slightly above what the national average is, but it was our first report card. So we only were able to do 9 categories. I think in the national report card, there are 16 categories. So as you can see, aviation was our highest grade, and then roads at a D+. And so the report card looks at our infrastructure in, I think it's 7 ways here. So we were looking at it in capacity, condition, funding, future need, operations and maintenance, public safety, resiliency, and innovation. So each of those infrastructure categories are looked at with that lens. And so if I had to summarize it in just a sentence or two, it's age of infrastructure and funding levels to maintain those infrastructure categories are the big things. And so our goal is every 4 years to update our state level report card. So our next one will be in 2022. The goal would be to release that around this time next year. Nationally, they do it every 4 years also, and they will be releasing theirs in March of this year, so March 2021. And with an update to either report card, it kind of shows what the trends are for each of those grades. So we'll see how roads fared in the last 4 years. Does the grade go up or down or stay the same, and why it could do either. And so that is the gist of the report card, and it's a very important matter to me and most people on this call. So thank you for having us. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Greg for the next portion.
Thank you, Jason. Good morning again. My name is Greg Stonehouse with HDR Engineering, a global consulting firm. I'm based here in Minnesota, and I'm on this call today because I'm the chair of the Minnesota 2050 Committee, which is a committee that was formed in about 2008, 2009, based upon the need for intentional and sustainable infrastructure management and investment. This slide here just shows you what our committee is all about as a committee under Minnesota chapter of APWA. Our mission is educating the citizens of Minnesota about the importance of wise investment in our infrastructure. And our focus is around primarily making sure that infrastructure is here to maintain and ensure public safety, to support a strong economy in Minnesota, and to maintain Minnesota's quality of life that we've all become accustomed to, and quite frankly, the people of Minnesota deserve. So first, I'm going to talk just a second about, we were going to run a video, but we're running a little long, so I'm going to ask Pat to save the video for after. Anybody that wants to stick around after, we can get that, but make sure we get all of our speakers in. I'm just going to talk about who Minnesota 2050 is here for a moment, and how we try to engage. We built this coalition of 19 member partners from all across the infrastructure industry. These are professional associations from all across Minnesota, urban, rural, and across all the branches of our infrastructure. Our primary focus is educating and informing several key demographics on the need, the importance, and the value of sound and sustainable infrastructure investment. And when I say sustainable, I don't necessarily mean green. What I'm talking about there is employing infrastructure funding and investment strategies that enable us public works professionals to ensure that public safety, support for the economy, and that quality of life, and do that perpetually as efficiently and cost effectively as possible. Right now, what that means is making 80, 90, 100-year-old pipes, pumps, roads, and bridges last another 50 years. So we target these three demographics from our 2050 committee. The first is those professionals. We've got 10,000 partner members in these 19 partner organizations, and we use them to go out and try to drive grassroots engagement from the public. This Raise Our Grade that you see here is a mobile-based application that we developed because we saw the need for some sort of a tool for us to connect with the public and try to create that awareness and give them an access to easy visibility into that report card that Jason mentioned, so that they can see the grade, their infrastructure grade, right there in their local area. And our efforts to connect and educate the public through attendance at state fairs, at local Rotary Club meetings, all kinds of meetings across the state where we try to engage. What we found is the public is really surprised when we tell them that our legislators say that they aren't hearing infrastructure as a big priority and a big need from their constituents. And the public doesn't understand that this isn't a priority. That maybe the legislators don't hear it as a priority from the public. They feel it should be a given. And that's one of the challenges we see with infrastructure is it tends to be taken for granted until it doesn't work. So our third audience there are those policymakers, you folks, the lawmakers, our elected officials, and our legislators. And we're trying to use this month, and thanks to Senator Johnson for setting this up for us, to get some access and give you folks an ask, I guess. And the ask is that we need attention. We need attention for sound infrastructure investment. And our offer in return is that we've got the professionals here within our committee, within our partner organizations, who are willing, ready, and able to educate, inform, discuss, come down to the Capitol, answer questions anytime as we move forward. So I'll stop there and I'll turn it over to Lori Blair, who is the executive director of one of those partner organizations, Minnesota Rural Water. Lori.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to be a panelist this morning. Many of you may not be familiar with Minnesota Rural Water Association, so let me just briefly explain. We're a nonprofit association that's governed by a board of directors, and we're headquartered in Elbow Lake, Minnesota, over in west central Minnesota. We've been incorporated since 1978, so we have over 40 years of providing technical assistance and training with over 20 full-time personnel that are trained to offer on-site, which is difficult right now, but technical assistance and training to water and wastewater system personnel in managerial, financial, operation and maintenance, as well as source water protection. We're funded through grants, contracts, and memberships, which allows us to offer our services at no charge to communities and the water and wastewater systems there, and rural water districts, but we focus on populations of under 10,000. So those rural areas, and you can see from the slide that I have up there, just how many communities there are in Minnesota with populations under 10,000. And infrastructure in the form of water treatment and waste disposal that we focus on, it's hugely important to the vitality and success to these smaller communities in these rural areas. After all, they deserve the same quality, safe drinking water and waste disposal that larger communities enjoy that have more resources. The aging infrastructure in the smaller communities is just as expensive as the larger communities, but they have less customer base to spread the costs around, and so it becomes extremely expensive, as well as considering that in smaller communities, those water and wastewater user rates to access that safe drinking water can sometimes be very, very expensive because of that. And a lot of communities have older assets. And again, with the larger, less population, there's just not always newer customer bases moving in, but the way we manage water it's extremely important to everything in Minnesota, and we need to maintain that quality of life, as Greg mentioned, for rural Minnesota as well. Because after all, Minnesota, greater Minnesota is where we live, work, and play. All of us enjoy, and we need to keep that vitality going. So the next speaker is Craig Gray. He's the Public Works Director and the City Engineer for the City of Bemidji.
Well, thank you, Lori, and everybody, thank you for the opportunity to be here and represent some of the cities in Minnesota. Kind of use this slide to show, first of all, where we are. We are about an hour and a half north of Brainerd. And just an example here of what a typical city might have for some infrastructure in our city. For instance, we have 100 miles of city streets, roughly 80 miles each of sanitary sewer and water main. Interestingly, we have about 2 miles of water main still in the ground that's over 100 years old. That's something that we've been working on for the past 15 years at getting replaced, and yet we still have 2 miles of 100-year-old water main. About 40 sanitary sewer lift stations. We have a 2,000 gallon per minute water treatment plant and a 1.2 million gallon per day wastewater treatment plant. So unlike the metro community that you may have your water system and most of your sanitary sewer system may drain to the main plant down in St. Paul, outstate greater Minnesota cities also have their own wastewater systems that they have to take care of themselves. Our biggest issues right now, and one of the things that we do, our city council has been very supportive of an infrastructure management program. We currently reconstruct about 1 mile per year of city streets. And, you know, in round numbers, a reconstruction here in Bemidji of 1 mile of just a normal 30-foot wide road costs about $1 million. We have 100 miles of roads, and doing 1 mile per year, that's really simple math. That means we're going to have a 100-year rotation of our city streets. We all know that a street is not going to last 100 years. As civil engineers, we typically look at 35 to 40 years for a street. So, you know, that's really an issue for us. And I think many other cities is looking at that rotation and going, what are we going to do in 10 or 15 or 20 years when we just can't keep up? We currently have a $16 million water treatment plant under construction. The first phase of that will be wrapping up here in the next month. The second phase will be starting next year. We actually got some state bonding for that second phase, so we really appreciate that. And that is to treat PFCs that's in the city wells up where we have our well field, and then also do some iron and manganese removal as well. We also have on the books, we need a new $6 million primary digester at the wastewater treatment plant to keep up with development so that we can continue to serve the restaurants that come in and all of the housing projects. Another new project that we have is phosphorus, as we all know, is a big issue in lakes and rivers and wetlands. One of our main lakes in Bemidji is Lake Irving, that has been determined to be a at-risk lake. And so we are doing a $500,000 phosphorus treatment project on that lake this summer as well. So that will help meet some of our stormwater requirements. So with that, I think we'll open, I guess the final thing I'll say, one of the things that we as cities, especially in greater Minnesota, have been really looking for is, probably about 4 or 5 years ago, counties were given the opportunity to pass a local option sales tax to fund roads. That option is not available to cities yet. And that is something that I know our city council is very supportive of. And although Bemidji has a population of 15,000 people, roughly, we serve as a regional hub. We serve probably, it's been shown to be 40 to 45,000 people, but yet we only have 15,000 people paying that tax base to serve those 45,000. And so the ability for cities to get away from the assessment process, the charging of the homeowner for street projects, and to be able to pass a local option sales tax if we want, to get this 100-year rotation down to even a 45 or 50 is something that we are really hoping that's something that the legislature will begin to look at here in the future. And with that, I think I'll turn it back over perhaps to Beth and probably open it up for some questions perhaps.
Thank you, Craig. We were going to slow play it, but Craig just went in for the kill and said, we need what we need here. So thank you so much, Craig. Think about all those cities, right? Craig is one of hundreds of people that are managing, look at what he's managing in one community, and then think of all the communities, big and small, across the state. So that gives you a little bit of insight into what we're dealing with here and why we're asking for more money, even though we got a bonding bill this year. So does anyone have any questions? You got a wealth of knowledge here with our 50 folks on the call. We'll take questions from anyone. I don't believe we have any in the chat. So go ahead and unmute yourself if you have a question that you'd like answered.
Good morning. This is Senator Kunish. I do have a quick question. The roads, the grade that you gave roads in general is what, a D+ or a D-? And so my question is, that's an overall grade, but are there certain areas of Minnesota that have like excellent roads, and then compare that to other areas in Minnesota where they need some really strong, extreme assistance in building up their roads? So can you just talk a little bit about disparity in roads across the state, please?
Yeah, we don't have, it's a cumulative data for the whole state. So I don't have a breakdown of specific areas, but I think every community has some good roads and some really poor roads. So I don't have an exact answer for you, but the majority of our road network in the state is actually the county road system and not the MnDOT system. So there's a lot of state county roads, there's a lot of city roads and township roads. Mm-hmm. And so the MnDOT roads get a lot of focus. So
yeah, Jason, I want to jump in here, and Senator Kunish, we can talk at length about road condition. As you know, I probably will bend your ear, but roads are one of the very easiest pieces of our infrastructure to assess the condition of, because our county roads and our state roads are all part of what's called a pavement condition, or all have an annual or every 3 years, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, pavement condition survey conducted by the owner, that being either the county or the state or state aid. And so we assess very objectively the distresses. So even the lineal foot of crack, the square foot of alligator cracking, or just the different distresses that even if you didn't know the scientific name for, you could tell if a road's in bad shape. And we assess those and quantify them. They are put into a management system, and that's what engineers use. So a brand new road would have a pavement condition index of 100 or 95 and higher. And then a poor road would have a condition index down in the 60s. So without a question, there are roads in Minnesota that are very good, absolutely. But I would say more than half, and this is what pulls the average down to a D+, would have a pavement condition index of something in the 60s or 50s. And then even if we do an overlay on a poor road, which every one of the engineers on the call knows that we are, because we don't have money to reconstruct, we might be, just like with your house, you might be, putting duct tape around the pipe before until you can get it fixed. We might put an overlay on a road and that brings a pavement condition index up to maybe 75, but we know that an overlay is a short-term fix. So there's extremely detailed information on both our roads and our bridges because we're required to assess those. If anybody's interested, I don't know how pipe condition is assessed. Does anybody want to jump in on that?
Yeah, I was going to say something on that, Ann. Thank you for that. It is, we can do televising of our sanitary sewers, and that is done a lot. And there are some, not easy, but some cost-effective ways to trenchlessly rehabilitate our sewers. But that's one of the things I wanted to mention was that it's a great question on the transportation side. The reality is for every mile of street we have, we've also typically got a mile of water main and a water of sewer main that are underground, and out of sight, out of mind is the challenge. So our condition assessment data is not nearly as easy to get as Ann mentioned it can be with roads on the surface. So we don't have as good a data on that, and many times that infrastructure is a lot older, and unfortunately people don't think much of it until they turn the faucet on and the water doesn't come out, or they flush the toilet and it doesn't go away. So that's one of the challenges that we've got is our infrastructure is tougher to assess underground. And a lot of it is older because we have repaved streets, but not replaced the water and sewer underneath them over the last 100 years in many cases. So it is creating, and especially I think it creates an even bigger challenge in greater Minnesota, where you've got smaller and declining populations in some areas, as Craig and Lori both mentioned, and a lot of infrastructure to manage with fewer people per square mile to do it.
So let me just jump in here. We've gone beyond our half an hour just by a little bit, but we'd like to continue talking for anyone who can join us or stay on. But if anyone has to jump off, thank you so much for joining us, and definitely check out our website, APWA-MN. We'll be posting this recording there later today, and then there's information on the next 3 Thursdays and what we'll be discussing and who will be on those panels. So thank you so much. And
Beth, I'm going to interrupt you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Next Tuesday, we're talking about toilets. So everybody should join in, because I think if there's one thing we don't want, it's sewage in our basement. So please join in.
I believe Mr. Grayson with APWA wanted to go back to his slide and make just a mention here. If we could go back
Thanks
to
so
his
much. Yeah, it
first
was
slide.
my
second
slide. What's often missed, and it's not the chart, the infographic on the left-hand side. When we speak with members of Congress and agencies in Washington, there's kind of this misnomer that the federal government is spending all of its money on infrastructure. And if you look at that chart, and we have it online, for instance, with highways, state and local government are actually spending 74% of all spending on highways. Water, 96% are local and state. And one of my thoughts has always been, it would be great getting state legislators in Washington with us, meeting with members of Congress, so you can share with them, hey, we're picking up almost all of the expense on infrastructure, we need a little seed capital. We need some WIFIA. We need grants that will just work with us and help us. The last point I had was picking up on the last speaker. When we look at roads and water, they're actually not mutually exclusive, because if you rip up a road to replace a road, it would be foolhardy if you don't look at replacing the water mains and what's underneath it if it's needed. And when I was on the city council here in Golden Valley, residents never quite understood that. You know, it's like, why do we have to spend all this? So just a couple of last points.
Thank you so much, Scott. Does anyone have any other questions?
Beth, I would like it if you would expound a little bit on your point in the chat that many cities do not have money to even rate. So when I was talking about the pavement condition index, remember that was for, I said the owner pays, that's for MnDOT owned roads and the state aid road, which are owned by the counties and MnDOT. It's a joint thing. But Beth, can you talk a little bit about how small towns that are not part of state aid, what tools they have at their disposal?
Yeah, I mean, I can even speak a little bit about Ramsey County, a big town with, you know, supposedly lots of resources. You know, they don't spend a ton of money of their like bonding money on infrastructure. So even at the county, they know what they have. They have 300 miles of roadway, 300 some signals, but they really don't have one comprehensive way of rating that. I mean, it's really hard because it does just, it's software to do that. In this age of technology, we shouldn't be using pieces of paper or even spreadsheets anymore because there is technology out there to do those things, but they cost money and you can't just do it once. It takes resources. So think of those small communities. They don't have necessarily maybe the money to spend on the technology, and then they might not even have a person to maintain it. So garbage in and garbage out, right? Even if you have the software, but you don't have the time to take to rate those pipes or those roadways, you're not going to know what you're even looking at to tell your elected officials how bad it is.
Mm-hmm. Well, and Beth, I can piggyback on that, and you're absolutely right. I mean, our situation, we have 100 miles of roads, and we often get calls from salesmen and consultants. Hey, you should buy this pavement management software, rate your streets. Well, we don't even really need to worry about that right now, because I don't really care what's in the 70 to 75 or above score. I have so many streets that are in the 50 to 60s, as the senator stated, that I don't need to rate all my streets. I have plenty to pick from every year that everybody would agree on their condition. So it's not a matter of trying to sell the neighborhood or sell the city council on, hey, here's the technical aspect of why the street is bad. No, we can all see it.
Yep. And I know that, counties have wheelage tax, and Ramsey County took their wheelage tax, and they were doing a large program of mill and overlay, and they really took their rating up. But if they're going to start in getting those ones that are like 40s, and every year those pavement condition indices are going down, they're going to have to really understand, or their elected officials are really going to have to understand, we're not talking about a mill and overlay that we can get, $2 million to cover a handful of miles. We're talking about those dollars that Craig mentioned, millions of dollars for street reconstruction. So those are the ones that really need it, because otherwise you're overlaying them and it's almost putting good money after bad, because you're getting almost nothing for it. You can put an overlay on, but if it only lasts 2 or 3 years, which can happen, it's almost a waste of money.
And someone also put in the chat, sorry, I can't remember who it was, that overlays don't allow you to fix geometric problems. So what geometric problems mean is if you have a curve that's too tight, or the sight distance is not appropriate. A lot of our roads were built on old township roads, so they have very tight curves. I'm sure all of you can think of one in your own, neighborhood or your own county. And so if we are doing an overlay, we just place on top of the existing alignment. And so safety considerations are also important to every one of us, whether it's road geometry or water quality. I was laughing, Craig said they take out manganese in their water. And I thought, I wonder how many people even know what that is, or thank Craig every time they drink and they're not getting brown teeth or whatever. I mean, it's really important and we just take it for granted. I can see some more chat, so I'm going to let Beth answer some more questions.
See how quickly I can read and absorb comments versus questions. Feel free to speak up if you do have questions. I'm seeing lots of really good comments in the chat. Well, if there aren't any more questions, we would like to play a video that we would have played if we had had more time, but it's a 4-minute video. It was created under Minnesota 2050 a few years ago, or maybe it's been more than a few, but it's a really good video that talks about the need to maintain our infrastructure and really the impact on good infrastructure on everyone. So we'll pull that up, and if you have to jump off, it's not a problem at all, but got four more minutes here.
You like to eat. Most people like to eat. And our agricultural economy, our agricultural industry, so to speak, in the United States has been something that's made our country great. Minnesota is noted for dairy farms and wheat fields and corn fields. And those farmers have to get their product to the market. And then the market has to be able to get it distributed, whether it's over roads, whether it's over bridges, whether it's getting it onto rail lines, whether it's getting it to ports so they can put it on cargo ships and transport it. It's important that we get that product to the consumer. Not only important to the farmer so that he and she can maintain their livelihood, but also so the consumer can have the food that they need to continue their everyday life. The quality of the roads and bridges, the quality of our ports, the quality of our rail lines are integral to that basic tenement of our economy and our way of life in the United States. China is investing 11 to 13% of their GDP in their infrastructure. India is investing 9% of their GDP in infrastructure. Currently, we're investing less than 1.5%. If we don't invest in our infrastructure, we're looking at 3.5 million jobs are going to be affected. We're looking at a gross domestic product that's going to have over a $3 trillion effect on our gross domestic product if we don't take care of our infrastructure. And infrastructure in America actually improved. It went from a D to a D+. But you may have a child in grade school or possibly high school. If they brought home a report card and it said D+, you probably wouldn't be very happy with them. That's what we are leaving as our legacy to the next generation. We've got to do a better job of taking care of what we've got. And our infrastructure, whether it's roads and bridges, whether it's inland ports and waterways, whether it's the railroad system, our water and wastewater systems and our stormwater, we've got to do a better job of taking care of them for the legacy that we're going to leave to our children so that they're going to enjoy the quality of life that we have. The United States is the greatest country in the world, yet we're falling behind in taking care of the basic factor of life that affects quality of life, and that's our infrastructure. I applaud what Minnesota has done. Minnesota has developed this program, Minnesota 2050. When I was national president of APWA, I challenged the APWA chapters, what is your chapter, what is your community, what is your state going to look like in 2050? Minnesota took up the bit, and they have done something about it. They have developed, and they are developing a Minnesota 2050 plan. We've got to get people's attention. People have got to realize that the quality of life that they enjoy is fragile. It's not something that's guaranteed. It's something that happens because someone else has made an investment. Are we prepared to make that investment?
All right. We can definitely stay on. I see we still have lots of people still on the call, so if there's more conversation.
We're going to move on, make this fairly quick to keep us on track here. I'm actually going to hand this over to the steering committee chair for Council of Chapter for the 2021 year, to Pete Adler, who is.
I think you've got to stop the YouTube.
Yep, that was part of the video.
It was a great YouTube, though.
I was wondering who that was all of a sudden.
Just not quite relevant.
Sorry about
Well, it
that.
seems like there's a lot of interest in this topic, so I'm looking forward to the next few weeks for sure.
Yes. Yeah, and we've decided for next week to be all about water, since that's really one of those less seen aspects of infrastructure. And there's a lot of infrastructure that touches on water, whether it's water in your home, water that runs to the lake and needs to be treated. So we can talk more about that and educate folks who aren't familiar. Any other questions or comments for today? All right, well, we're going to see if we're able to preserve all of the good conversation in the chat. Otherwise, this video will be available on our website later today. And at the end, there's a slide that has lots of links. So thank you again, everyone. Have a really good Thursday.
Thanks very